Thank you for tuning in once again to Gods, Demons, and Magic. This is your host, Sri Satchidananda Das. So we've been discussing the Egyptian mysteries by Iamblichus, and in this particular section, Porphyry is asking the Egyptian priest Enibo about many different subject matters. And he asks about the cosmology of the universe. He asks about the absolute truth, the one or the good in Platonic philosophy, that supreme truth which is beyond matter, separate from matter, transcendent to matter, and yet the source of all creation, the unmoved mover, the cause of all causes. And he asks about the material universe which extends from this absolute truth and how it is structured according to the principles of astrology. And then finally he also asks about, within astrology, one's personal daemon. And we've discussed the astrology aspect of the cosmology as well as the personal daemon in depth. So we want to talk today a little bit about the absolute truth, or the one. In this earthly realm, we look up into the sky and we see a brilliant ball of fire. And just as the soul is the principle of life within the body, so similarly the sun, that ball of light, is the principle of life within the universe. When you look up into the sky and you see the sun, you're essentially within the body of the universe looking up at the soul. The plants that we eat, the oxygen that we breathe, it all comes from the power of the sun through photosynthesis. The sun also creates stability. It regulates nature. It causes the consistency of the seasons, as well as the movements of the weather. Life on Earth exists within a very narrow field, and it's miraculous in which this narrow field is maintained in a very delicate balance within the universe. If the sun were to stop moving, those of us on the night side would freeze within a few hours, and those of us on the day side would burn into ashes very quickly. And so it's this almost like a mechanical cycle of movement within the universe. It's really maintained by the power and the presence of the sun. Just as a king, the presence of the king creates law and order within his kingdom, so the presence of the sun creates order and consistency within the universe upon which life itself is based. The sun is also the source of creation of this solar system and everything we experience. All the elements, with the exception of the man-made ones that you find on the periodic table, they come from the sun. They're born within the belly of the sun, like a furnace. All of the iron, all of the nickel, everything that the planets are made of, including our own bodies, including all of the plants and trees, everything is actually born within the sun. So when you're laying on your back or you're looking out your window and you see this brilliant, beautiful ball of light, shining through the shimmering leaves. So everything, we're more or less like on the periphery of creation, looking at the very source. Everything has actually emanated and come from the sun. So it's the very principle or source of creation itself, as well as the life which sustains that creation. Beyond this gross physical realm, the sun exists in the astral realm, or the noeric realm. And there he's not simply a ball of fire. The sun is a god. In fact, he's the head of the gods. He's the demiurge. And his power, it comes from the transcendental realm. He's a manifestation of divine light within the realm of the gods, which then spills over into the earthly realm as the sun itself. The Platonists call him the logos. He's articulated thought. Within the realm of transcendence, the Platonist says all the archetypes for existence, all the different forms and bodies and everything that you can experience within creation, it exists on the absolute platform, but at an undifferentiated state. It's all sort of mixed together in this big, brilliant light of transcendental bliss, where knowledge, beauty, all the different qualities which we admire are sort of mixed together into one experience, the one or the good. And so the demiurge, or the sun, he is that God which he's that one, or the platform of the good, is shining through him. In fact, it's the source of his light, and it's the source of the physical light we see within the world. He's sort of like a prism, shining out that one white light of the transcendental realm and fracturing it into the rainbow of creation. He takes those qualities which exist in an undifferentiated state and the absolute platform, and then draws them into himself, and then pushes them out into the creation we experience. And so this light of the noetic or transcendental realm is shining through him, and it illuminates the entire noeric or astral realm. You might say that the light of Brahman, or the light of transcendence, shines into the realm of the gods through the sun god or the demiurge, who manifests creation from himself and also illuminates that creation both with light and with life itself. And just as the sun, the physical sun, provides order within the world that we experience and stability, so similarly that light of wisdom, that light of truth, that light of beauty that comes from the transcendental realm and shines into the realm of the gods, it creates order among the gods, and therefore he's the king. He's not the king because he's, powerful and forcefully holds them within his control, but he's the king because he's shining out brilliantly and therefore, bringing that light of truth, that light of goodness into their realm, and it's by that light that everything is ordered. And we can experience that within this earthly realm as well. You're just driving down the street, that just driving itself is an experience in practicing order. There's the various rules of driving. You have to stay within the lanes. There's the various signs which direct you. And yet there's also the light by which from the sun that you see all these things, that you can see the street, you can see the signs. So the light of the sun allows you to actually see everything and to order the universe. So similarly, the light of Brahman, or the light of the one, or the good, or the transcendental platform, that light is the source of all knowledge by which everything is ordered in the universe. It's that light from within which allows you to see the universe in the proper perspective. And just as, say, with driving, the various rules of driving, you can trace them back to the driver's handbook and to the DMV and, through the state legislature, etc. So there's an actual organized hierarchical system of authority. So similarly, there's a hierarchical system of authority within the universe, which also rests upon the personality of the sun god. He's the king, and he directs and orders the universe in a personal way amongst the gods. So he not only gives the structure in terms of the rules which all the demigods, the hierarchy of gods, are meant to the order of the universe, but he gives the divine light from the transcendental realm by which people are able to see and understand those rules and to practice them. And the sun god is also the mediator between the earthly realm and the noetic realm, or the good, or the one, the realm of transcendental light. He brings that light of transcendence and wisdom and knowledge down into the world, and then he guides those in the world back up towards that light. It's almost like when you're looking at the sun, you see there's a ray of light which is coming down and beaming into your eye. But imagine if you could also, by mystic power, and some yogis are said to be able to do this, you could actually travel up that beam of light and return towards the sun. So there's this kind of two-way avenue. The sun brings Brahman, or transcendence, into the world, and then as a god, he also brings the world back towards transcendence. And for the perspective of the Platonists, nous, or awareness, divine intuitive understanding, the ability to see the world with clarity due to spiritual purity and understanding, that comes from the sun. It's the blessings of the sun. And therefore you'll see in many traditions, and it's very fascinating, that you'll find the same type of prayer for spiritual understanding or wisdom or clarity of knowledge and purpose. He illuminates you from within and raises your consciousness. In India, when one is initiated into the Vedic literature, and especially among the priestly class, one will chant the Brahma Gayatri mantra, which is chanted just as the Egyptian priests chanted their mantras at the rising of the sun, when the sun is at the mid-heaven, and when the sun is setting. And it's meant to essentially, to draw down that transcendental knowledge of the sun from the spiritual platform into oneself. You're praying for the sun to give you diya, or to give you essentially clarity of understanding, to purify your consciousness, to elevate your perspective to the platform of Brahman, or transcendence. It's very similar to the Platonist idea of nous. And the idea is the same, that the sun is bringing down this transcendental illumination from the higher spiritual platform, and it's through that illumination that one can clearly see reality through purified consciousness. And it's that in all the good qualities that we see, such as beauty and knowledge and strength. All of these things have their origin in the spiritual platform. And so you're essentially praying for the sun to fill you with that light of Brahman, and to allow it to enter into your intelligence, your capacity to understand, and in doing so raising your consciousness. Also within the Indian tradition, the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God, it's described in the 4th chapter of that text that this particular literature was first given to the sun god. And the Bhagavad Gita is a kind of exposition on the different systems of yoga and how one can approach the absolute truth through bhakti or devotional yoga, through jnana or contemplation, through dhyan or transcendental knowledge, through meditation. So all these different systems of yoga raise one's consciousness towards the transcendental platform. And especially emphasized there is that one has to learn to do their duties, their worldly duties, in divine consciousness, doing them as a sacrifice ultimately to God, but doing them in a detached state of consciousness as a kind of meditation. And this was given to the sun god as a kind of guide for the universe. The sun god is meant to then disseminate this throughout the royal order of the demigods, and introduce into the realm of the gods, as well as into the earthly realm, where it was meant to come down as kind of like a handbook among kings. And so that the kings themselves were meant to perform their duties as the authorities of human society in divine consciousness. They're meant to be in a meditative state and doing their duty as a king, detached from the fruits of their work, as well as understanding their position as a pure spiritual spark, as a soul, and not as their physical body, and ultimately doing it as an offering to God, so that their consciousness enters into enlightenment while they're doing their duty. It's very similar to in Plato's idea of the philosopher king, or as you'll see in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was also supposed to be a sort of a combination of essentially a transcendentally realized priest who's in the position of a king. And so the sun, as a god, is meant to extend into human society divine wisdom and invest within the leadership of society essentially saintly character and saintly consciousness. And when the leaders of society have this consciousness, then the rest of society becomes illuminated. So it's that transcendental illumination carried down into the world through the sun and all the way into the furthest reaches of human society, pushing out the darkness of ignorance or the darkness of sin. So that's the sun will do that, or the sun god will do that by teaching these divine scriptures as well. And then finally, on the highest platform, the noetic platform, the transcendental platform of the one, the good, or in the Indian tradition, Brahman, this platform is considered the divine source of the sun. Rather, the sun is a sort of reflected manifestation of this higher platform into the world. And that world is again one of divine light. And Plato and Socrates discuss this in great detail. In fact, Socrates says, as the sun illuminates the visible with light, so the idea of goodness illuminates the intelligible with truth, which in turn makes it possible for people to have knowledge or to understand everything else. It is the cause of knowledge itself, seeing things in its light, and it is the supreme object of knowledge. So meaning that this divine transcendental realm of light, which then comes into both the demigod realm as well as our gross physical earthly realm, as the sun god and the sun. So that light which is carried into this world, it's the cause of knowledge itself. It's the capacity to see things clearly. Just as we can only see things by the power of the sunlight, so in the same way, we can only know things by the power of the light of Brahman, or the light of the absolute realm, or the good, or the one. It is knowledge itself. It is that illumination which allows us to see, sort of imagine that illumination inside of ourselves shining through our own eyes. And then it's through that light from our own eyes that we look upon the world and see things truthfully or in their proper perspective. And the one, or the good, is the supreme object of knowledge. Meaning as you filled or endowed with that divine light within yourself and able to see the world clearly with a spiritual lens, then the ultimate thing that you can see, the highest level of knowledge, is when you then turn your vision back towards the one or the good. So does the absolute truth, the supreme objective. There may be so many different categories of knowledge, such as chemistry, biology, mathematics, but ultimately that science which actually leads one or shows one to the one or the good or the absolute truth, that's the highest form of knowledge. In the Vedic literatures, especially the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra, they go into great detail about this transcendental platform of pure unity and light. In fact, it's called the Brahma Jyoti, or the light of Brahman. It's described as Sukasya Kanti Kasyacha. It's the ultimate abode of transcendental bliss or happiness. In some of the Vedic literatures and Upanishads, such as the Ishopanishad or Srimad Bhagavatam, they even describe that one should go through that light or beyond that light, that it's considered a yoga maya, or a kind of curtain which hides the supreme feature of the absolute truth, which is ultimately personal. In other words, one has to penetrate through this light and actually come to the source of the light. Just as you see the sunlight shining in the sky brilliantly, one can actually penetrate the sunlight and come to the sun globe itself, and there, perhaps in the noeric realm, meet the sun god. So similarly, one can penetrate this light of Brahman and reach to the very source, which is God himself. So thank you very much for listening. If you found value in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope that you'll join us next time on Gods, Demons, and Magic.